My parents and best sis hid my acceptance letter because it'd embarrass her Ivy League application, so I showed up at her dorm's welcome event. She spilled her wine. So, to summarize before I dive into this, I, 23F, recently got into a prestigious university, but my parents and my older sister, 25F, actively hid the acceptance letter from me because they were afraid it would hurt my sister's chances of getting into an Ivy League school. They told me to keep quiet, and for months, I did. But then one day, I couldn't take it anymore, and I showed up at my sister's dorm's welcome event to confront her and my parents. I'm still processing everything, but here's what happened. I've always been the quiet one in my family. Growing up, it was always about Celeste. She was the golden child, everything came easy to her, from school to social life. My parents adored her. Even when we were little, I remember feeling like I was just there. I never asked for attention, but sometimes I wished someone would notice me. Celeste's success was her ticket to everything, and by default, I was just her shadow. When I got my acceptance letter from the University of Chicago, I thought it was the breakthrough I had been waiting for. I'd always dreamed of going to a school like that, a place that felt like it would finally let me be me, not the sister of someone great. But as soon as I showed my parents the letter, something shifted. My mom's face didn't light up like I expected. Instead, she just stood there, staring at the letter for a long time, almost as if she couldn't believe it. Then, she turned to my dad, who came into the room just in time to see my excitement fade. "I don't think this is a good idea," my dad said after a long pause. "Celeste is applying to Ivy League schools this year, and if people hear about Sarah getting into U Chicago, it could hurt her chances. I think we need to keep this quiet for now." I was stunned. My hands were still holding the letter, my dreams literally in my grasp, but all I could hear was their concern for Celeste. "Wait, you're serious?" I said, barely able to form words. "This is a huge deal. I got in, and you want me to, what? Pretend it didn't happen?" My mom looked at me with that sympathetic but distant look she often gave me. "Sweetie, Celeste needs this. She's worked so hard for her applications, and this could look bad for her. You don't want to hurt her, do you?" I felt the blood drain from my face. Of course, I didn't want to hurt my sister. But it wasn't like I had done anything to cause this was my moment. The thing that I had worked so hard for, the thing I deserved. But my parents were insistent. I was told to keep the letter a secret, to keep my happiness locked away for the sake of Celeste's future. So, I did. For months, I kept quiet. Every time I wanted to tell someone, my best friend, Rebecca, anyone, I stopped myself. They had made it clear that this was about family, and family was all about supporting each other, right? But it didn't feel like that anymore. It felt like I was invisible. Celeste was applying to Ivy League schools, but why didn't anyone care about my future? Why did I have to live in the shadow of someone else's dreams? It was only a month later when I saw the email about the University of Chicago's welcome event for freshmen. It was an invitation to visit the campus, get to know other incoming students, and see what the school was all about. I had never been to Chicago before, and the idea of walking around the campus where I was supposed to study, where I was supposed to build my life, filled me with a kind of excitement I hadn't felt in ages. But that excitement was quickly dampened by the reality that I wasn't allowed to tell anyone. My parents didn't know I had the email, and I certainly wasn't going to tell Celeste. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was sneaking around, doing something I shouldn't be doing. But something inside me told me I had to go, even if I had to do it alone. I packed a small bag, left a note for my parents saying I was spending the weekend with Rebecca, and booked a ticket to Chicago. I didn't even tell Rebecca what I was doing. I just needed to feel like I was in control of something for once. The whole way there, I was anxious. I kept imagining how my parents would react if they found out. Would they be angry? Would they try to guilt me into coming back home? But when I finally arrived in Chicago, the city felt different. Alive, like there was something waiting for me here. It felt like freedom. The first thing I did when I got to the campus was take a walk through the quad. The buildings were grand, the grass was greener than I had ever seen, and the students were walking around with that familiar new student nervousness. I could feel my heart racing. This was it. This was my future. As I was wandering around, taking it all in, I saw a familiar face in the crowd. Celeste. She was with a group of students, chatting and laughing with them as though she was the center of attention, because, of course, she was. Celeste had that effect on people. I couldn't help but notice how effortlessly she fit in, how everyone seemed to gravitate toward her. But then she saw me. Her eyes locked with mine, and for a second, there was a flicker of confusion before recognition hit her. "Sarah," she called out, her voice hesitant, almost too sweet. She started walking toward me, her perfectly styled hair bouncing with every step. I froze. My breath caught in my chest, but I forced myself to walk forward. "Yeah, it's me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "Isn't this the welcome event for incoming students?" I looked at her, then at the group of students she was with. They were all staring at me now, and I could feel the pressure building. This was the moment. The moment I could either stay silent or speak up. "I'm here because I got in," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. Celeste's eyes widened. "What?" "I got accepted to U Chicago," I repeated, a little more firmly this time. "You didn't think I knew, did you? You didn't think I'd find out that Mom and Dad hid the letter from me? That they told me to keep quiet because they were afraid it would hurt your chances?" Her face turned pale, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. She just stood there, her mouth slightly open in shock. "Sarah, she started, but I wasn't going to let her off that easy." "No, Celeste," I cut her off. "I'm tired of being in the background. Tired of you always being the center of attention, always having everything handed to you while I get ignored. I'm not going to pretend anymore. This is my moment. I deserve this." I watched as she looked around at the group of students, who were now whispering to each other. It felt good, in a way, to finally speak my truth. But then, in the middle of the tension-filled silence, something happened. Celeste's hand, which had been holding a glass of red wine, wobbled slightly. The next thing I knew, the entire glass of wine flew through the air, splashing across her white blouse. For a moment, time seemed to slow down. Celeste stood there, frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief as wine dripped down her shirt. The other students in the group immediately rushed to help her, but I just stood there, watching it all unfold. It was as if the universe had decided that this moment needed a little more drama. I turned around before anyone could say anything else, before Celeste could recover from her embarrassment. I didn't need to be there for her apology or her crisis. This was about me now. But I still had a long way to go. And what came next, I could never have predicted. As I walked away from the group, I could hear the murmurs of the other students behind me, but I didn't care. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I had to keep moving. I couldn't stand there any longer, couldn't let them see how badly my insides were shaking. My mind was still reeling from what had just happened. I'd confronted Celeste. I'd said what I needed to say. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was standing up for myself, not just silently accepting the role of being the invisible sister. But there was still a nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. Was I wrong for doing it like this? Did I handle it all the wrong way? I found a quiet corner near the library, where a few benches were tucked away in a small garden. I sat down, resting my elbows on my knees, trying to catch my breath. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Rebecca. "Hey, is everything okay? You disappeared for a bit." I stared at the screen for a moment before typing back, "Yeah, it's fine." Just needed to clear my head. I didn't want to get into the details over text. Rebecca would be furious if she knew what I'd done. She was always the one to tell me I deserved more, but I wasn't sure she'd understand why I felt the need to confront Celeste the way I did. Another text popped up from my mom shortly after. I could feel my pulse quicken. "Sarah, what are you doing in Chicago? Celeste just called. She's upset. You can't keep doing this to her." My stomach churned. I didn't want to deal with them, not right now, not after everything. But I couldn't ignore it. Not forever. I typed back a simple reply: "I'm here because I got in. I'm doing this for me, not for you or Celeste." Then, I put my phone down and leaned back against the bench, staring up at the blue sky above. The wind rustled through the trees, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. It was strange to think that after years of living in the shadow of my sister, I was finally free. Free from their expectations, free from the silence, free from being the one who was always overlooked. But there was still so much left unsaid. So much unresolved. What would happen when I went back home? How would my parents react? And Celeste? I couldn't even begin to guess how she was feeling right now. I wasn't sure if I had broken her or if I had just made her see something she hadn't been willing to acknowledge before. The rest of the evening was a blur. I stayed on campus, walking around aimlessly, trying to make sense of everything. I ended up in a small coffee shop near the campus, where I sat and tried to calm my nerves. Every time I took a sip of my coffee, my hand trembled slightly. By the time I got back to my hotel room, it was late. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, wondering if I had made a mistake. Was it worth it? Was it worth the chance of ruining the fragile relationship I had left with my family? At that moment, my phone buzzed again. "Sarah, please talk to us. We don't want things to be like this." It was a message from my dad. I stared at it, unsure of what to do next. I had spent my whole life trying to make them proud, trying to prove that I was worthy of their love and attention. But now it felt like I was finally standing up for myself. And yet, the weight of their disapproval pressed down on me more than I could have imagined. My mind kept drifting back to Celeste. To the way she had stood there, frozen, as her glass of wine spilled all over her blouse. It was almost poetic, in a way. The person who had always been in control, who had everything handed to her, now caught in a moment of complete vulnerability. I wasn't sure what I expected to happen when I confronted her, but I didn't anticipate that. I lay there, staring at my phone, trying to decide whether I should respond to my parents or just keep my distance. What could I even say? What did I want them to understand? Did they deserve an explanation? The next morning, I woke up to a series of missed calls from my mom and dad. I had turned my phone on silent before I went to sleep, hoping I could finally get a full night's rest. I wasn't sure what time it was, but it felt like I had barely slept. I took a deep breath, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread in my chest. I knew what was coming. They were going to try to guilt me, to convince me that I was wrong, that I had gone too far. I was preparing myself for their disappointment. But I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending. I had already made the decision. I was going to live my life for me. Not for them. Not for Celeste. I sent a message to my parents: "I'm sorry if you're upset. But I can't keep pretending. I'm doing what's best for me now. I'll figure this out on my own." Then I left the hotel, heading toward the campus once more. This time, I wasn't just a visitor, I was a student. I didn't know what would happen with my family when I returned home, but I knew that my future was waiting for me, and it was mine to shape. As I walked around campus, soaking in the excitement of my new life, I couldn't help but think about everything that had led me here. The years of being overshadowed by my sister. The pressure of always trying to meet my parents' expectations. The secret I had kept for months, trying to make them proud by staying quiet. And now, here I was, finally speaking up for myself, finally asserting that I deserved something too. But I still hadn't heard from Celeste. Would she reach out? Would she try to make things right between us? Or would she simply stay silent, like she always had when things didn't go her way? I didn't know. But I was beginning to realize that, maybe, it didn't matter anymore. For once, I wasn't going to worry about her. Or about my parents. I was going to live my own life, no more hiding, no more silence. Just me, stepping into the world that I had worked so hard to be a part of. The rest of the day passed in a blur of orientations, campus tours, and meetings with other freshmen. It felt like a dream. I couldn't believe I was really here, finally where I belonged. But the nagging thoughts about my family, about Celeste, lingered in the back of my mind. I would have to face them soon enough. But for now, I allowed myself to bask in the freedom I had fought so hard for. And that night, as I lay in my dorm bed, staring up at the ceiling, I finally allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was what life was supposed to feel like, free. The next few days passed in a whirlwind. Between settling into my dorm, meeting new friends, and attending freshman events, I barely had time to think about my family. But no matter how many distractions I found, I couldn't completely escape the lingering thoughts of Celeste and my parents. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to apologize for taking control of my life. I deserved my success, my happiness, and I would no longer let anyone, especially my family, make me feel like I didn't. A week after my arrival in Chicago, I received a message from Celeste. It was a long text, and as I read through it, I felt a strange sense of relief. She wasn't blaming me anymore. She wasn't calling me selfish. Instead, her words were almost vulnerable. I've been thinking a lot about what happened last weekend. And I realize I've been terrible to you, Sarah. I've always been so focused on myself and my own future that I never stopped to think about how you were feeling. I'm sorry I didn't support you when you needed it. I didn't realize how much you've been carrying all these years, and I didn't want to face it. I was afraid of losing everything if I wasn't perfect. But I see now that I've hurt you more than I ever meant to. I hope you can forgive me. At first, I didn't know how to respond. I was shocked, to say the least. This wasn't the Celeste I had known for years, the Celeste who always had an answer for everything, who always assumed she was in the right. This was different. This was a sister who was finally willing to admit she'd made a mistake. I sat with the message for a while, contemplating. I wanted to send her a message that would let her know I heard her, but I wasn't ready to let it go entirely. Not yet. I had waited far too long to be seen, to be heard, and this wasn't a moment I was going to let slip by. Instead of responding right away, I decided to let her stew in her own guilt for just a little longer. I wasn't going to ignore her forever, but I wasn't going to make it easy for her, either. So I waited. In the meantime, I started to get more involved in my classes and extracurricular activities. I joined a few clubs, made some great new friends, and even started working on a project that combined my love for literature and psychology. Slowly, I began to feel like I was building something that didn't involve my parents or my sister. One evening, as I sat at my favorite cafe on campus, working on an essay for class, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from my mom. I took a deep breath before answering. "Sarah, where are you?" she asked, her voice tight. "We've been trying to get a hold of you. Why haven't you called us back? Celeste is really hurt by what you did. She's your sister. Why are you treating her like this?" I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. I could already feel the old patterns of guilt creeping in. But I wasn't going to let her pull me back into the same cycle. Not this time. "Mom," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I've been busy with school." I'm doing okay. And you know what? Celeste and I need some time to figure this out. I need time to figure out me. But you've hurt her, Sarah. You've embarrassed her in front of her new friends, and now she's struggling. Can't you see how this affects everyone? It's not just about you. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I took a slow breath. I didn't do this to hurt her, Mom. I did it because I had to. I've spent my whole life standing in her shadow, and I'm not doing that anymore. If she's struggling, maybe it's because she's learning what it's like to be on the other side for once. I'm not going to apologize for standing up for myself. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought my mom was going to argue further, but then she simply sighed. I know you're upset, Sarah. I don't want to lose you, too. I could hear the pain in her voice, but it didn't soften me. Not anymore. I'm not going anywhere, Mom. I'm just going to live my own life now. And maybe, one day, we can talk about this more. But right now, I need to focus on me. I hung up the phone without waiting for her to respond. Later that evening, Celeste called again. This time, I was ready. I didn't let her get away with the usual excuses or deflections. I told her, in no uncertain terms, what I had been feeling for all those years: the resentment, the neglect, the constant feeling of being second best. I wasn't holding anything back anymore. I don't know what I expected from her, but what I got was something I hadn't anticipated. Celeste was quiet for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was small, almost timid. Sarah, I'm sorry. I really am. I didn't realize. I didn't know how much you were suffering until now. I was so focused on my own fears, my own pressure to be perfect, that I couldn't see what I was doing to you. And I'm sorry it took me this long to see it. It was a humbling moment. I had been prepared for defensiveness, for excuses, but instead, I got sincerity. It didn't fix everything, and it didn't erase the years of neglect, but it was a start. I'm not saying this will be easy, Celeste, I told her. But I'm finally standing up for myself, and I need you to understand that. I do, she said quietly. I really do. And I promise I'll do better. I won't take you for granted anymore. And for the first time in my life, I felt like Celeste actually saw me, not as a reflection of her own success, not as the background character in her story, but as someone with her own dreams and aspirations. The following weeks were still filled with ups and downs. My parents didn't exactly approve of my distance, but they respected it, even if they didn't fully understand it. Celeste and I kept in touch, but I kept my distance, too. I wasn't going to let her off the hook just because she apologized. I needed time to rebuild the relationship, if that was even possible. But what I did know was this: I had finally taken control of my life, and it felt damn good. No longer would I play second fiddle in my own family. No longer would I shrink in the background, allowing my dreams to be dismissed for the sake of someone else's. And when I looked at my acceptance letter from Chicago again, this time, it wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a symbol of everything I had fought for: the recognition, the validation, the chance to prove that I mattered. And in that moment, I realized that the greatest revenge wasn't about showing them up or causing them pain. It was about living my life the way I wanted to, on my terms. That was more satisfying than anything else.